Okay, so we're live here. Fortunately in my office, nowhere to go, so I'm going to be very quiet. Tim's doing it. Just waiting for Martin to come in, who I need to add to the conversation. Okay, hopefully he's around, and hopefully come online and he can do a lot of the talking. Nobody watching anyway, so I don't need to worry. But it is being recorded.
Hello, James.
Hello, Martin. How are you?
I've got to stop. We've got to stop doing this, putting each other on our laps or something. I don't know. Am I on your table?
Yes.
All right, you're on my lap. All right. I hope it's nice and comfortable. I managed to get a cup of coffee.
Mine's empty.
I didn't use the IoT kettle. I just used I could have used a saucepan, but anyway. Oh, we're live. We're live.
Well, we're actually broadcasting live now and straight live at 12.
We're straight to it. Yeah, that's
got nobody watching, so but it has been recorded, so we can just refer to it later.
Yeah, I always find editing too much of a hassle, though. I usually don't often bother. So, how do you want to go then?
Well, kind of for those people who are watching live or are watching now, well, they're not watching live because no viewers, but there will be eventually. But this is the recording. So, one of the things that JISC is doing in the moment is consulting with the sector and experts and independent people and a range of people about kind of 6 co-design challenges, of which one is the intelligent campus. So really what we're trying to do is trying to get some input from people about, you know, what are the key issues in this area, what's the key thinking, but eventually so that we at JISC can start to form together some ideas about what we're going to do in this area. So that's the kind of thing. So what are the kind of, you know, so from a university or college perspective, what are those key considerations? What are they doing that, or what do they want to do? And we're not just thinking about what should we do today with our internet connected kettle, but actually what's the kind of plan for the next 5 to 10 years, so we can start, you know, either producing services or resources or advice and guidance that goes on that. You know, if you've got a big build coming up over the next 10 years, the question is are you going to ensure that that building is intelligent in terms of doing it, and why would you do that? But also I think the other aspect is putting this kind of, the way I view it is very much about thinking you've got the physical building, you've got the technology, but what's the glue that combines it all together, the kind of teaching and learning, and how can you use the building and the technology in order to both enhance, enrich and support the whole teaching and learning? So that's the kind of thing. So we've got kind of some questions, so I'm going to use those as kind of stimulators for discussion, and I should have brought these up a bit earlier. That's not really, just taking too long to download, probably because I'm live streaming. That's always the issue, isn't it, in terms of doing it? So
doing it on the same machine, yeah, I suppose, and over wireless too. You're on wireless?
Yes, I should have plugged in the cable. So here's the first question to you. If I say intelligent, you know, we talk about the intelligent campus, but actually we need to have a kind of shared understanding. So if I say, what is the intelligent campus? What does that mean to you?
Oh, let's start with definitions.
It doesn't have to be a definition. It can just be what you feel.
Well, there's lots of there's viewpoints on that one. Technology viewpoint, political, business viewpoint. You know, it depends. From a technology viewpoint, you know, it is probably, you know, IoT, isn't it? Internet of Things, a kind of building, which is a kind of extrapolation of the old BMC, the old building management control systems, isn't it? In a sense, gone, you know, to the extreme in a sense. So you've got sensors and actuators everywhere, and then databases behind that, and of course logic to do something from the sense to the actuator, that kind of stuff. Also, it could mean surveillance, but anyway, we come on to that.
Surveillance. I mean, let's not call it surveillance because that sounds a bit Big Brotherish, and maybe talk about tracking. You know, and you know, you could talk, the example I would use is Waitrose. So Waitrose use their Wi-Fi network in order to track customers, even if the customers aren't connected to the Wi-Fi network. So what they're looking at is those kind of usage patterns around the supermarket, who's going to the eggs, who's going to the vegetables, and so on. So I think, you can call it surveillance, which it is, but we could also call it tracking, which is something maybe
Well,
not as threatening.
I suppose that's the other point of view on it, isn't it? That's maybe the political view of the intelligent campus, which is, the purposes, the hidden agendas, the assumptions behind the algorithms. So that, the political view would be tracking and what you do with the data and how you use the data, that kind of thing. We could backpedal quite a bit and ask why intelligent campus? Because I read Steve Wheeler's really good blog this morning, and he was talking about the hidden assumptions behind the algorithms, the biases, and so on there. And so, since it's logic, I just before we came on air, I had this sort of brainwave. I thought, it's just smart. It's only intelligent. It's not sentient. So it can't reflect. It's not conscious of itself, and therefore, it's just about sense act. Hopefully a bit of learning in there, but it's not conscious. So it's subject to control, all the kind of operant conditioning. This is where we are with intelligent systems at the moment. It's just like.
But that's actually one of, if you had I'm not going to say sentient. Well, yeah, let's do a sentient campus, one that could think for itself. Actually, that probably could in theory be better than one where the algorithms are written by people with hidden agendas.
Yeah,
someone's got to program Space 2001, isn't it? Open the library doors, Hal. The reason why Hal broke down was because he had. I hope there are no spoilers. If you've not watched the film, look away now. But the thing with this HAL 9000 was he had conflicting orders, and that was the reason why he went a bit doolally. One was the mission, and the other one was to protect the astronauts, and there was once this conflict, he then failed miserably to survive. But that's where I think the reality is we're probably not going to have a sentient, intelligent campus for ever.
I'll tell you what, James. I'll tell you what. In education, you'll never get a sentient campus because there's a loss of control. The education is all about control, in a sense. That's one of my frustrations. I was in a Twitter kind of conversation with Bob Harrison last night, and I was exceedingly grumpy, because 35, we could say over 40 years in EdTech, and I've not seen anything really change. I've only seen lots of money spent on systems that generally just continue the status quo. It's just the politics behind it, And so, BYOD, social networks. So the struggle, we go on to a different topic, but the struggle of education to deal with those sentient things, if you like, those things which are self-determining, it's been challenging. But the education system wouldn't have any problem with the smart or intelligent building, because it can enforce the politics of control, if you like. There'll be a challenge, but big systems, big money, it loves it. JISC, to be cynical, JISC, they get on this bandwagon. There's a lot of money, there's consultancies, there's systems, there's, it's just a nice little learner. And you would have to ask, okay, now get onto the business side, I suppose. There's a business perspective of the smart campus, really, which is that, it's a nice little learner. You have to ask, though, if you're certainly for a new build where it will be most applicable, because you can put in all the infrastructure that's required on a greenfield, you'd have to ask the opportunity cost. If you're going to spend, it's quite expensive.
Well, I think isn't that the reason, though? The cost has been a real limiting factor because clever facilities management software has been around for some time. It's been there. I've seen it in industry and I've seen it elsewhere where people manage their rooms and their buildings using systems which we don't in education because to be honest, it's a cost factor in terms of doing it. Just it gets a limit. If you're designing a new build, you're often going to, right, well, what can we lose? We've got to cut the budget. We've got to move. Do we get rid of the toilets? No, don't be silly. We don't get rid of that. What we do is we get rid of the clever bits that are seen as superficial and adding very little value. And I think that, to me, that's one of those interesting things where if we add a teaching and learning layer to that in that smart building, could we then actually start to see some real benefits of a smart building to the learner? And so to me, there's various things about that. One is about creating ideal environments. So I've been in conversation with quite a few people who teach and facilitate sessions and so on. And one of the challenges they find is if you're in the wrong kind of room. So if you're trying to teach a group work and you're in a raked lecture theatre with all this, it's really challenging to do. Or if you've been at events, haven't you? You want to run a workshop and they're all in rows of seats, and say, get your laptops out. Where am I supposed to put it in terms of doing it? So that kind of links into things like timetables. So your typical module, which is 100 hours. You'll have 40 hours in a classroom, which is 1 hour, or a lecture theatre, 1 hour a week, and it's the same classroom, it's the same size, and it looks the same and has the same equipment facilities, regardless of what you're designing to do in there. So immediately you're constrained by the physical environment to do what you've always done because you've always done it that way. Whereas if we start to think about a building which could start to could understand what you were trying to do and then make suggestions on the best room.
Yeah, that's not new though. I mean, we were doing that in the 90s, I remember, and you could do it on paper. It's I think that, to me, what the Internet of Things does is adds a level of data, and then we start to add in the analytics that make this much more clever. So rather than just having the right space, it's also the right temperature, the right humidity, the amount of Wi-Fi. So you may, and if you want to start about energy savings, rather than having, you want multiple Wi-Fi routers around, but you may not necessarily need them all on in order at that point. So they're switching themselves on and off depending on. I'm just, this is what this whole point is. We don't know. That's the issue. What we're doing is throwing ideas out there, or creating conversations about, like you said, we've been doing this since the 90s. We've been doing it on paper. Nobody really wants it. Well, fine, that's fine. Let's just take that, wrap it up, put it in a little brown cardboard box, and put it on the shelf and leave it in terms of doing it. But if it's something that people think differently, what do you think? Well, what you said about bringing teaching and learning into it is a good point, because a lot of it is a systems approach. You're thinking, well, you're putting the cart before the horse problem, isn't it? You've got smart buildings. There's this assumption in Steve Wheeler's blog post as well. Are we something along the lines of we need to use smart building? It's always an assumption, a prerequisite that it's a given. And then if you start arguing against it, I've come with my hoodie on, so I'm kind of like trying to be the rebel here. I'll stay rebellious for a while, perhaps. but there's this, if you argue against it, you are the Luddite. You are against the future and so on. And I'm an IT guy. I spent my life in IT. I'm a little bit jaded, I suppose, about the effects of IT, but I still get excited by certain things. What I don't get excited by is solutionism. This idea of you've got to have a problem to solve, and often you put the solution before the problem. We've got a solution now. So we've got a smart building. Let's find out why we need it. And then the way that it's validated against quantitative data, like it will improve retention, it will improve attainment, it will improve attendance, rather than maybe the aesthetics of well, it make learning much more enjoyable, which may have the incidental knock-ons of better results and things like that, but not necessarily. But people are looking at it, to do things it's not designed to do, so they're willing to just throw money at stuff. Now, I've seen. Well, we tried kind of this stuff.
I'm just going to interject there. As you're saying, if learning is not fun, you're saying that's not a problem. Saying that learning has to be fun or something else. But if it's something that's going to make learning more fun, isn't that solving a problem?
Yeah, but
Because
they don't. I know we both agree on this. But yeah, that often is left out of the equation, the logic of it. You know, it's all about hard facts. I was having this bit of a Twitter argument with Bob Harrison last night about the TES Awards, and the lady, the UK FE chat lady, was saying, you know, I want to see hard data on attention, retention, achievement. And I thought, where's the blue sky thinking going? You know. And so I put out some tweets before this. You know, there's a talk I'm going to give in December about systems thinking and design thinking. And I called it Human in the Loop because I saw this picture of a little girl in an MRI scanner. And an MRI scanner is really scary. It's a big piece of machinery. And what happens is people get anxious. They don't stay still. You know, it causes a lot more. So what they've done is they've given the little MRI scanner toy to play with, or in some of them they've dressed it up as a castle, or so it becomes an adventure. You see what I'm talking about? So instead of going for the efficiency and the systems approach of effectiveness, efficiency, solution to problem, they're looking at the aesthetics, you know, a design approach. So that's what I would say. You know, my big interest in a smart campus must be aesthetic. I put out a few tweets of like, I don't know if you've come across the Hena Hotel.
No.
There's this hotel in Japan that's entirely, well, it's a smart hotel. It's got no people in it. It's all run by automata, robots and rubber arms and vending machines and stuff like that. You know, people go there and they say it's all right for one stay, but you know, out of curiosity, but it's got no character, it's got no soul. You know, interestingly, the only humans in the hotel are the security guards and the cleaners at the moment. Security guards got run upstairs. You know, it's a bit difficult for the robots at the moment to do things like that, and so it's a low skill task there. But so I think for me, a smart campus will be a nice campus. You see so many of these; they look like operating theatres. You know, they're all white. They're all kind of bland office furniture almost, if you like. You know, sometimes they're a bit like the HAL thing in 2001. You know, it's very white, it's very sterile. So we used to do we never used to call it smart or intelligent. We used to do, we had mag strip entry cards back about 97 or 98, you know, and then we changed them to touch somewhere in the noughties. We never thought of it as smart. You know, we did have this idea, you know, you touch it and up will come your timetable, up will come, you know, your information of what you've got to do. So we never thought of it as smart. You know, we just thought of it as, you know, more of a design approach. This will be useful. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I throw ideas at you and see whether, not that I can change your mind because I'm not intending to do that, but just kind of this kind of concept of some of the perspectives I've been talking to other people about what is the intelligent campus and what it potentially could do. And I agree with you. I think we do sometimes approach things from a solution perspective. We sometimes approach things from a technocentric approach. You know, we got this technology, we ought to be able to use it for something. I have to, but I think it doesn't mean that you can't do that. You can't do a solution-based perspective, and I sometimes think you can do a technocentric. Find out, you know, what the possibilities are with these technologies that we may not be aware of. But I often approach these kind of whole things from a learner perspective. So what I mean is that learner experience, that learner journey. And it's not saying that they've got a bad learner journey and it's this problem that needs to be solved, but it's about how can we actually, you know, move from an experience where somebody's learning is something to be endured to learning is something to be enjoyed. And that's the kind of is what it's about. So we're seeing education less as a kind of process to move people from one part into employment in terms of units, but it's actually about education in the sense of creating a person who, don't like, I was nearly said fitted into society, but even that seems a bit kind of draconian. But actually, holistic, make them holistic.
Yeah, well, we really are on kind of ambiguous territory, because one, what is a smart building? Two, what is education? What is the purpose? Remember that a while back, the purpose edge. What is the purpose of education? Is it for jobs? Is it for society? Is it for the individual, develop the individual, and make them an economic unit? What is it?
So I'm going to take all that baggage and just throw it out. Because I do think there are these but I do think there are important questions. But I suppose the sort of scenario that I can envisage is, if we start about some of those key issues that learners have expressed the need for. One is flexibility. I want to be able to learn when and where I want to, rather than being dictated by the structures of a building or a timetable. So that's the kind of, at the moment we it's all very, you have and this kind of process. I think some people say, learners would get confused unless they're in the same room every week, because they tried it once and it all went doolally. But it's like, really?
But we do assume that, though. I mean, we do assume and project that on the learners sometimes. Do the learners want to work flexibly like that? We are making an assumption and a projection of our own psyche on them, in a sense. Got to be aware of people. I'm not always. I've been quite surprised. I mean, there's a whole problem with the system in a way. They've been conditioned through school. Through and then when they come to, I've had that. It's been like detoxification. I've had projects where I've given them complete autonomy to organise their project and their work, and they find it really hard at first, anyway, for maybe 3 days, like typically coming off some sort of drug or something, or some habit forming.
Withdrawal symptoms of formal education.
It takes I've noticed it takes about 3 days, and then they're okay. They, because I've been described as a bit of an anarchist, and I like chaos and non-structure. And I project that on other people, thinking they want it too. And I've been surprised how much structure some people want. So everybody's different, James.
Yeah. Actually, that's when we talk about flexibility, aren't we talking about differences? So there will be some learners who want structure. There will be some learners who don't want structure. And the thing is that what we actually do is we have a single standardized process for everybody, regardless of who they are. Yeah. And that's where I think, but there is limiting factors and resources, cost and time and all those things means we can't do that. But could we use technology in order to actually start to take into account those differences? So the kind of the sort of things I think that would be useful for a learner, or potentially could be useful for a learner, is I know you talk about touchscreens. Knowing that what I've got to do on campus that day, could I have some kind of application? It could be a phone app, it could be something else, but some kind of process that would inform me about the best place to go. There's nothing worse than going somewhere thinking I'm going to go and, oh my god, the library's closed for refurbishment, or that my favorite place has been taken by that group over there and they're speaking loudly. So being able to have a system that took into account personal preferences.
I'd interject again though. Absolutely agree. Individual differences, Michael, not personalization, but what's the other? Personal, because personalization is a customization of a kind of thing, whereas if it's personal, the dynamic is with the individual. But personal learning for individual differences. But you're saying, can we use technology? Well, it's just maybe we start with the personal learning, and then is there anything technology can do in there? So we're always pushing. I can understand why JISC would do it. Always pushing, and why they might call the ed tech industrial matrix might want to do it.
The ed tech industrial complex.
Why they would want to push a technology to solve that, where it's not always necessary. But. I've got my. I'm trying to play devil's advocate with my rebel hood on, but sometimes got to beware. I tell you, see, frictionless. What you're describing there is like frictionless retail, or frictionless operation, where there are, it's easy. The banks can pick your pockets now, really with the wave of a hand, with the wave of your stuff.
We talk about frictionless. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy, because I think the other thing that we could start to implement is are you aware of British Cycling's marginal gains analysis?
Yeah.
So the idea of doing little changes that then have, and add up all those little changes that make big differences. So you can talk about frictionless, but actually you may also want to add friction. So what you want to do is, where's it written down that learning always has to be comfortable? Sometimes the best learning happens when you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So the Open University did some research which showed that learners preferred a particular traditional form of delivery on distance learning. And when they were forced into an uncomfortable situation where they had to do group work and all that kind of stuff, they didn't like it. So the student feedback was poorer. Outcomes, it was better when they were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that there's that kind of thing. If you do what it's always been, I always say never listen to the learner voice. I always say be informed by the learner voice. And I think those are two very different things. Because if you ask learners what they want, they're not necessarily always going to be the right. Because if you ask me as a learner what I want to have a master's degree without having to do anything.
Yeah.
That'd be fine. I'll have that. That's me as a learner. No value whatsoever. But I got a piece of paper that says MA after it. I'll be fine. But it is about being, to me, it's about being informed by the learner voice. But I do think I do like the idea of frictionless. I think that's quite a nice phrase, but there's nothing stopping us to kind of add friction to kind of like wake people up, or to get them to think differently, or to try something new, or to go around. And I think that what the interesting is though I'm obviously coming at this from a slightly technocentric perspective, I don't disagree with you in the sense of we do need to think about the underlying issues around it, and maybe that's what we need to resolve first before we then start thinking about the technical solutions to those kind of how we're going to achieve this. I mean,
I would at the starting point, rather than a fixed idea of what a smart building is, and then you have a definition, then you validate against it and you go forward. It's many different things. It's difficult though with that kind of dualistic view. I do think the aesthetic is important. For some people, a smart building is like a safe building. I remember, and again, we didn't think of this as smart, but it's an awful long time ago. I don't know when it was, about 2004 or something like that, when we thought touch cards were even too much friction. You've got to carry it around, Why don't we go for biometrics? And we had a serious look at fingerprint for the entry gates, for the library, etc. And we got a whole lot of kickback on that, and that taught me a lesson, because I thought, wouldn't this be wonderful? You don't have to carry a card around, just touch with your finger. But then there was the stories that we were shown, like in America, school had done this, and although it's encrypted and it's not the same as the fingerprints that the police use, there was a crime in the area. The police put pressure on. They managed to use the school's fingerprint database to match the fingerprints at a crime scene. And although they weren't meant to, and I always remember that, because all these arguments about whose data is it, how's it protected, how is it used, who can get access to it. A lot of the kind of techno optimists just discount that, and I always remember that story. And then there was also the concerns about health and safety, because you touch a card, that's fine. When you touch your finger, there's been how many other people have been touched that. I remember going to Madame Tussauds, and they had Arnie Schwarzenegger's handprint, and I put it on. A couple of days later, I got a wart. Because there's there's so many people been touched. It's the same. So people say, no, I ain't touching my finger on that, or I'm not giving you my fingerprint. Face recognition, we looked at again. We looked at, this wasn't so long ago. I suppose it was about 5 years ago. We again, we're still looking at that stuff. I think the college at the time wanted to try and make some kind of name for itself for something in EdTech, and so there was something they used like in high security environments where you did your face recognition, and the cost was ridiculous. The accuracy was back then was not that good. Especially, people coming in with, it's much better now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could go on all day about why I think biometrics is wrong. I know you'll never catch me using it. My main argument about biometrics is there's my thumbprint in terms of, she's got a quite nasty scar on there actually, but I can put up.
Oh, I'll take a photo of that now.
Exactly. But the thing is, my password I can change and reset. But when people say, "Oh, it's encrypted," it's actually no. What you're doing is you're turning my thumbprint into a series of numbers. That's all you're doing. That numbers cannot be changed because my thumbprint is unique to me. But there's numbers. That means it can be hacked. You talk about, I'm going to put a thumbprint scanner on there. Well, no, because what it does is it turns into a series of numbers. If I can then put a number pad onto that same, the device is expecting a series of numbers, not a thumbprint. And it's the thumbprint scanner that turns it into numbers, where you just input those numbers into the system, and therefore it's things. It was you, but it was your thumbprint. It was like, so I'm actually I want to take that biometric stuff, just kind of push it to one side, because I think it's one of those things which people think is really secure, but actually I think is high risk in many respects. But that's a different story. I mean,
I'll tell you a story, James. So I'll just interject because it's relevant now before I forget. I'm cognitive things are better, but my mind's going. But I took a colleague of mine, Richard de Saint Croix. He had one of the new Android phones a couple of years ago with face recognition on it. And he was showing it off to me. I thought, that's pretty good. Unlocked phone. I thought, well, I'll take a photo of you. I put my phone in front of his, locked his phone. I always remember that. Obviously they've improved it now, but I thought, just like you're saying, then you can't change his face. That's the trouble, the two-factor authentication. Well, the frictionless stuff. I mean, this is what a lot of people think about a smart building. You walk around and things just happen. I did tweet a picture of Michael Jackson in the Billie Jean, walking down. I don't remember the video where he walks on the path and bits light up. I remember, when we put in the intelligent lighting. Well, we didn't even call it intelligent lighting at the time, but where the corridors would go black, the lights would go out if there's no activity. And as you walk down the corridor, it all starts coming on. So being on, evening duty and things like that, I used to be walking around. The trouble is, it used to get spooky. Look down the end of the corridor, it's all dark.
Yeah.
And there's this kind of...
The number of times people in the office are doing this because the lights are going out.
Oh yeah, that as well. That too. Well,
that's where the way I think of what we're trying to do here is there's two elements to it. One is we know the existing technology isn't fit for purpose. That's been the case for ages. And technology at its very early stages isn't fit for purpose. Everyone talks about how wonderful the iPad was, but you and I we're probably using tablets in the 10 years prior to the iPad and thinking they're okay, but they're not really. I had a compact iPad before the iPad Mini or anything, those kind of things, and these things were kind of clunky. The interfaces were awful. It's like, why did Microsoft try and put a whole Windows interface on a 3-inch screen? And I think within the kind of when we're talking about things like beacons and intelligent buildings and all these kind of things, is we're still at that kind of very early developmental stage, and that as things progress, they will become smoother and easier. And the question is if the levers for that are about energy efficiency or control or these kind of things, actually shouldn't we at this point in time take a step back and say, actually, let's think about, if we want that developmental stage is going, okay, learner experience, learner journey, teaching and learning, whatever we want to do is about focusing those things. Otherwise what we do is we get a very efficient controlled building that actually causes problems for learners rather than one that actually makes it frictionless or actually improves the experience.
Yeah, the design, the problem with systems thinking approach to a smart building, if you like, is precisely what you're saying there with the clunkiness of early technology. The thinking, like Microsoft, I saw a Microsoft ad about 9 months ago in Sainsbury's. It said the phone that works like your PC. You reminded me of that. You see, when why would you put it? I thought, no, it's not a PC. It's a phone. It's completely different. So this is the problem of design, maybe technology driven. It's constrained by what is there. Instead of thinking, right, we want there'd be different types of smart building. One university or college or school would say, we want a green approach. Because you can't do everything. It's like education. The purpose of a smart building, purpose smart or whatever you might call it, But some might say we want a green approach. We want zero carbon or whatever, really low heating. And the smart building then may not involve so much technology or IT. You can have lots of insulation, solar gain for the windows. You can have soil on the roof. I'm talking outside my comfort zone here.
Well, at that point, I'll interject then. Absolutely. No, because I think actually you reminded me of something there about the kind of building design. And one of the things I always find interesting about building design is that they decide to, and I've seen it in buildings that have been built in the last 5 years. So it's not like that's how it was. This is how it is now. This is how buildings are designed, which is they realise that different parts of the building are done for different things. And they believe that only one thing can happen in a particular area. So you have within a typical new college building, that's the classrooms, they're the formal learning. That's the library, that's the informal learning. Then we have a social area, which is only for social. And then we have an eating area, which is only for food and drink. And only one thing can happen in each of those areas. And you and I both know. I mean, I was in London earlier this week, and I was at the Bloomsbury Theatre Cafe, which is part of the University of London.
Oh, I saw your
pictures, like disgraceful students learning in a coffee shop. In terms of doing it, they were taking up space. And actually, to me, that is something that when you talk about the building design and those things, is this idea that only one activity can happen in a space. And I think there's an aspect of how can we utilise those, almost learning spaces, is to make the building a learning space. And it's interesting when you look at I have to admit, not recently, but a few years ago, I looked at every single Ofsted report and I spoke to Ofsted inspectors, and the one thing that came out, there was quite a few patterns, but one pattern that always came out: anybody who was graded by Ofsted at grade 1 generally had a culture wherever you walked into the building you saw teaching and learning. You could walk into classrooms, you could see classrooms, you could see, actually the first thing you saw in the building was people learning, and actually a result kind of created a culture of where people were saying, this is a building for learning. It doesn't matter where you are. And I think there's aspects of that we could potentially think about is, and this is where I think technology is an aid rather than the driver, is how can we, to me, one of the things I always wanted to do when I was running libraries is to have a library that exploded or grew at lunchtime and shrunk back as the day went on. And it's just, and we did seriously consider about how we could, the kind of like dividing areas that you have on buildings and so on. I was thinking about how could we like expand into that room over lunchtime and then shut it when it became, it was really interesting trying to think about how we could physically make a space bigger for when it needed more space and shrink it when we didn't.
In terms of doing, college being the library.
Well, that was, to be honest, in the end, that's what I was helping a college plan a space, and we did actually in the end, and it was really hard actually because the catering people wanted to have the catering people just for catering. It's like, but you only use it in the morning and at lunchtime. It's like, why can't we turn this into the library? And it's like, well, what about the books? It's like, the income that you earn from one student, over a year pays for any spillages on books or resources and those kinds of things. And you've got to think that's a different way of thinking. If you think I'm only going to allow eating here, I'm only going to allow reading here, you're only going to do these kinds of things, is trying to think about why do you have those systems and processes in place.
I suppose you've given me an idea in that conversation that because it's smart intelligence and things is learning, isn't it? You have to be able to learn from mistakes. And if you're not, now that's what intelligence is. It's one sort of thought of definition of intelligent. You can learn from mistakes and improve. And so at the heart of this, I'd imagine that your smart building should be adaptable. I say flexible. You're talking about flexible. So it should be able to accommodate, not necessarily assimilate, but it should be able to accommodate different personal individual differences. So it should be flexible to accommodate and to learn, if you like. I think that's the problem. There's no one size fits all in a sense. So that as long as the building can change in one way or another, like you were saying, this, you can't necessarily have fixed bits, but as long as those bits can expand or contract or be relocated with easier than others. Maybe that's one way of doing it. The trouble I've seen, that's only one part of it, though.
Yeah, no, that is the issue. I can think of it from that. There's this bit, but then there's that bit, that bit. There are all these things, and that's why I think how do you get that holistic approach to
Well,
both building design and culture, and it's like giving people a room. This is my room. No, it isn't. And ownership of rooms.
They've got advantages. You see, again with Bob Harrison, I had some conversations some years ago. Now, building schools of the future, and so they created these, nice, shiny buildings. Lots of open space and plan and everything like that. And then people were building the wall. Well, I've had that too, where we've knocked large areas down and the walls have come back up again. And it was like I was saying, it's like pouring old wine into new bottles.
Yeah.
You've got your smart building, then people continue the way they, unless you, it's part of it. We can't expect the environment alone to change the culture.
No, you've got to change. That's the thing. To be honest, I think as obviously we start to run out of time here, was that whole aspect of it's not just about the building. It's not just about, there is the whole thing about curriculum design, for example, in terms of doing it. And actually, curriculum design and delivery is based on other factors, external sometimes to the actual institution. So you can only go so far down a particular road. But actually, I'll ask you one final comment. Just because something is hard and difficult, does that mean we shouldn't do it?
Oh, definitely. I choose the moon, isn't it, and things like that. If there's one, I scribbled the thing down here with my smart technology here.
Nothing wrong with a bit of smart technology.
I did win
notebook.
It's convenient. It really does work at times. The agency. There's a thing I've got, the autonomy trap and agency that. We were looking for frictionless moments in teaching and learning. Now, this was mostly a management-led registration. I don't know if we talk about registration in class registration, and it was a management-driven agenda because teachers were rushing off. They weren't accurately doing the register, blah blah blah, and they wanted, tight data. And so they wanted to have what you might call a smart and intelligent solution to it. And so we're looking at all sorts of things, again, like face recognition or automatic. You got your badge, which has got RFID on it, and you walk through the door, through like the library, you walk through there and it registers you into the class and things like that. But then as soon as you take a technology approach like that, it all started, to mount up the costs and the complexity. So, well, what if somebody takes my card in, through the door, swipes me in, but I'm at home in bed, so we better have it validated somehow. How are we going to do that? Oh, well, the teacher at the front, will, and although registration, especially at the beginning, registration can be a bit of a burden. It takes out, time from teaching and learning. But it's also got a function of learning who your class is. You can see them. When it's all done automatically, you may not. You may not necessarily get to know the students.
I think there's an interesting thing there, isn't it? Which is you have a problem. People aren't filling in the registers, and you assume that there is a technical solution to that.
Mm.
And actually, technology rarely works as a solution. Where technology works well is where it either creates something new that you could never do before, or it makes what you were doing existingly better. Not necessarily, not making what doesn't work. What it does is it makes what does work better. Digital cameras is a good example of that, isn't it? It wasn't about making. It wasn't that film cameras didn't work. It's just that what digital did was it allowed you to have that same experience as a film camera, but instead of taking 36 shots on holiday, you could take 300. In terms of doing it. It had a knock-on effect, obviously, from your relatives who said, "Oh my God, they're going to show us our holiday photographs 2 days later."
The idea.
That's where I think technology works best, is when it makes things that work better, or it does new things. I think go back to your very first point. I think it's a good point to kind of finish up, and I'm going to say thank you, Martin, very much for this. And if you want to follow Martin on the Twitter, it's at TimeCord, KORD, isn't it? In terms of doing it, Time Lord, which is, you said technology. You didn't like this kind of solutions approach to technology, but I think even I'm now starting to come around to, I always thought technology was very good for solving problems, but actually it's not about solving things that don't work. Technology works best when things aren't working as effectively, or you can make it better in terms of doing improve enhancement. So Martin, thank you very much.
Yeah, I could waffle on for another hour on this. It's been
Absolutely, in terms of doing it. So we might do this again sometime then.
Yeah. Okay then, James.
All right. Cheers then, Martin. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.